real challenge to try and get materials online. So
So,
thank you.
no, our pleasure, Donna. Fafataya for joining us. Now, do you have a radio show? Were you saying you're doing radio after this?
Yeah, I have a talk show that I do every Friday night, so it's I always have to sort of grab a few minutes before I go off and set up. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us. And from a lot of the work that I've been doing with Science Circus International and Science Circus Pacific has been in Samoa and Fiji as well. And that's something we noticed when lockdown hit. All of a sudden, it wasn't just teachers teaching remotely, but also parents were trying to teach their children as well. So it's a really difficult but interesting time, at least as far as education goes. Okay, everyone, we've got a few people trickling in now. I'm going to bring that screen up as well. And I think what we can do now is a good time to kick it off.
Sabar ka lo, sabar ka lo.
I am Joe Duggan, and I am part of Science Circus International of the Australian National Centre for the Public Awareness of Science. And again, as always, what we want to do here is create a network of teachers from around Asia Pacific, share a whole bunch of lessons, let you know a little bit about the way we do science, and also learn from you. I acknowledge that we are, certainly I am, probably not the right person to be teaching the rest of the world about science. And so I want this to be a two-way relationship and learn from all of you as well. Now, the important stuff to kick it off with is, as always, we're part of a university and we collect data around the work that we're doing so that we can get better, but also so that we can look at the information and pick it apart and learn from it. And so what I'm going to do is share in the chat right now. No, I'm not. I'm going to make the chat disappear. I'm going to make it come back now, and I'm going to share a link to our ethics information. We do record these sessions. If there are ever times where you do not want to be part of the recording, all you have to do is let us know, and we appreciate your input and feedback. The other links that I'm going to share with you now are the important things to stay connected. Isla, can you do me a favour? Gosh, you are so good at this, jumping to the next screen already. Believe it or not, Isla and I used to work together in a past life, so it's a smooth operation now. I'm going to share a bunch of links to the ways that you can stay connected with us. We've got our Facebook page, which is where we speak to the rest of the world. There's the closed Facebook group, which is what we want all of you to join because it is a closed group. It's just for people that we've worked with in the past. And we really want to use it as a place to build this network of amazing educators and teachers from across the Pacific. Then there's a YouTube channel link. The final thing that I am going to share with you until later on is the link to make sure you're part of our mailing list. If you want to keep getting updates on all the various things that you can be part of with us, that's a great way to do it. Now, before I go any further, I actually did a session with Isla last week and I nearly stuffed this part up, and it's very important from my perspective to be able to do this. I want to acknowledge the lands of the traditional owners that I'm speaking to you all from at the moment. It's the Ngunnawal people, and I want to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also acknowledge the elders from the lands that you may well be on. All right, now everyone, today we are extremely lucky to be joined by Isla Nakano. I always do it wrong. Isla is, you know what, normally what I would do at this point is I would read a bit of paper that I've got here that's got Isla's biography and her experience. But we are lucky because Isla has been in television, and one of the things that television presenters often do when they work in the industry is to create a little bit of a show reel. And I've been doing a little bit of digging and I've actually found Isla's show reel. So instead of me clunkily reading what it says on the screen here, I'm actually going to share a video with you. Now I apologize to Isla because I haven't asked whether I can do this first. So I'm going to stop Isla's screen share in a second. I'm going to make this full screen. And instead of talking about Isla, let's watch something. And I'm going to make sure you can hear it as well. Isla Nakano.
I know, science is meant to be my thing, but I thought I'd give something else a go. And let's face it, this is Scope, so we're bound to discover some science along the way. It's happening! Oh, she's so
you've got the tail?
Roll to the right like this.
Wow! Thank you.
We're not just worms, we're ringworms.
What the hell? Wow, hello! I've never been this popular in my life. Do you have any tips for me? It's gonna be great.
It'll be fun.
Right. Bye, Alana. Do you know what they're made of?
I'm going to say dishwashing liquid and water.
Yeah, exactly. They're the two main components, but we can add a few extra ingredients to make them last even longer. Come on. Let's try a bubble in a bubble, shall we?
Go a bubble in a bubble.
All right. Oh! Acid rain. This is a
So look, that is a bit of a taster into
fear or panic. Both their hands in the air.
oh, screen sharing now. That is a bit of a taster into some of the work that Isla has done, but that's only part of it. Isla has been in science communication for many years now. She's worked in front of the camera, behind the camera, across a range of Australia's leading organisations in science communication. So I am going to stop talking now. I am going to throw to Isla to take the reins and take us through filming and video production. Can everyone give her a virtual or a real round of applause? Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone. It's lovely to be here. As Joe said, I've worked with Joe and his team in the past. I'm currently based a little bit further away from Joe. I'm in Brisbane, which is the Yagara people. And I'd like to acknowledge them, their ancestors past and present as well. As Joe said, I do have a bit of experience now in some video production and science communication and kind of and a bit of education as well now. So I wanted to share some of my experiences today and find out a little bit more about how you might utilise digital technologies and videos in your classrooms or science communication activities. So I'll just share my screen, go back to that. Bear with me one moment. There we go. Oh, sorry. There we go. So I want to start off firstly by giving a bit of context around why I'm joining the session today. And I've been asked firstly to share, with you a competition that's coming up, which Joe did mention in his email earlier or in the past. Now this competition is open to, I believe, and please jump in, Joe, if I've missed anything or I've said anything, but it is a competition open to anyone who is part of this workshop series, whether you're watching it now or you're watching a recording of it. But there are 20 microgrants totaling up to 150 Australian dollars. Now, there are two parts to this competition, and I'll go through what you need to do for each part of the competition a bit later on. But you'll notice that there are two deadlines. You have almost about 6 weeks, a month and a half to complete part one, and then a further 1 month to complete part two. So they're both due 1 month apart. Now, for this competition, you can apply individually, so by yourself, or you can apply in a group with a couple of people, or maybe as an organisation or a group of friends. That's kind of up to you. But do note that, as I said, there are 20 microgrants available. So think about how that might be, how you might make your groups and make your entries. So the details of what part one and part two actually involves. Basically, we would love to see, or Joe's team would love to see, what you've been learning from these sessions, and we'd love for you to compile it into a bit of a package. So for part one, we'd love for you to submit a lesson plan implementing a new demonstration you've learnt through this workshop series. Now, lesson plan, there might be a kind of a different explanation or description for what that might mean, but what we mean in this context for a lesson plan is a brief kind of description of an activity. It doesn't have to be a whole lesson plan. I know sometimes lessons can be 50 minutes long to an hour to a day. We don't expect it to be a full plan or an essay or anything like that. It can be quite informal, and there is a word limit to this one. We only expect 300 words. That's 300 words. It's not a lot of words. We just want to see that you have thought about one of the demonstrations. And then we'd love to see either a series of photos or a video showcasing your prototype. So we will, after this session, we will send you a link to the forms that you can access to get to these competition entries. But note that part one and part two will both be active at the same time. Is that right, Joe?
That's correct. Yep. So if someone has an idea and they implement it straight away and they want to submit something for both parts, that's great. But a really good way is to put your first part of the entry in, your proposal of what you might be doing in a classroom or learning environment. And as Isla says, something short and sharp. We'll say, hey, that's a great idea. Here's half the micro grant to implement it. Then you implement it and you resubmit showing what you've done and what you've learned. And then the other part of the micro grant goes to you as well. So it's just a great opportunity to try a small proof of concept in the classroom if that's something you're interested in.
Absolutely. So yeah, sorry. Thanks, Joe, for bringing that up. Just to reiterate, I didn't make this clear at all, so I apologise. But the micro grant will be granted in two separate parts. So half of it for part one, half of it for part two. And then part two is, of course, implementing, as Joe said, the lesson plan or the activity that you outlined in part one. And for this one, we'd like a little bit more detail. We'd love to know how it went, how it impacted your student, and bringing it back to the very first workshop that was delivered by Dr. Graham Walker, talking about cultural relevance or the context. So more about the relevance of your demonstration. As we said, we'd love for this workshop series to be a two-way street, and we'd love to learn from you as well. We want to see how you can make what we have relevant to yourselves. Which is why, yes, as we said, the reason for this particular session is to give you some resources, some tips for preparing you, I guess, for putting these competition entries in. All right, so we'll do a quick reminder and some Q&A maybe a bit later on about the competition, but let's move on to video production, which is kind of my area of expertise. But first of all, I'd love to hear from you and about your experience in video production. So if you are able to maybe flick to a new tab or on your mobile phones, head to this website here, Slido. And if you are, there are two pictures here. One's the desktop version, one is the mobile version. They should look something like this. And there'll be a place to pop a code. The code is UNESCO 4. So I'll just give you a moment to do that, and I'd love to ask a few questions. They will be anonymous, and I'll just flick over to a different screen.
I'll put that link to Slido in the chat if that makes it easier for anyone, and then they should just be able to click that and enter UNESCO 4.
Perfect, and it is up here also if I've just realised, yeah. Actually, is that sharing?
Yeah,
it's not.
That screen. No, it looks good. I've got join@slido.com, UNESCO 4.
Perfect. All right. So once you head to that, there should be a poll. Oh, There we go. Asking, where do you watch videos online?
I'm going to ask.
Is that coming up?
I'm not getting it coming up. I'm just getting. Oh,
Apologies.
let's
Let
wait.
me just double check.
No. Hey, it's working. Is anyone else?
Yep.
Is anyone else having any challenges? Let's see. I'm going to put this in the chat as well, and it might help. And the
Amazing.
code is UNESCO 4. So we should be ready to rock and roll.
Amazing. We've got, yeah, I think we'll kind of see them come through, and hopefully we'll get a bit of a grab of just the one question. Yeah, that's right. There should just be one question, or you can answer the second question if you happen to be able to see it, but we'll work through them one by one for now.
Isla, is it all right if I fill it in as well?
Please, absolutely. I'd love to hear. And you can answer, you can choose multiple answers as well. So if there are a few different ways that you watch you consume your online videos, please mark all of them. Oh, excellent. We're getting a few answers come through. Sorry, I'm just looking to the side. I've got a second screen here, which is what I'm watching this on. Oh, YouTube and Facebook, very popular. Absolutely. Now I'm interested in the people who are choosing other. Unfortunately, Slido doesn't have the functionality to be able to say where it is, but if you'd like to share in the chat, if you've voted for other, where I'm genuinely interested to know actually where do you watch your videos? If you could share that in the chat, that would be amazing. I'd love to know. Very interesting. 100% of people so far choosing YouTube as their main or as a way of watching videos online. And I'll just scroll down there. Sorry, it's a bit hard to see. We'll have that disappear in just a moment.
At the moment, Isla, the sharing screen that we can see is just still the join@slido.com one.
Oh, apologies. Here we go. Is that better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. You had no idea what I was talking about, did you?
No, it's okay, because on our screens where we're voting, it shows us the answer as well. So you're doing great.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. So yeah, please keep voting and have it trickle in. If you can't get to the Slido, feel free to pop it in the chat as well. We'd love to interact that way. But it's interesting so far on the Slido, no one said that they don't watch videos online. Everyone, all 9 people who voted so far, watch online videos somewhere, or they have so in the past, which kind of just, to me, it's interesting that it's such a big part of our lives now. All right. So I might come back to that just in case people haven't had the opportunity to vote yet. But I will then, I'll now unlock the second question, I think, unless it's already available for you. But the question now is, what have you made videos for? Have you made your own videos before? A lot of you, all of you who voted say that you have watched a video before. But what exactly are your videos for? I'd love to know that question. So the first answer, to show my family and friends privately, or maybe it's just for yourself. So for those people who just record videos, maybe you record videos of your kids to show your parents, or that kind of falls under the first category. The social media, again, maybe you take these videos and then you upload them somewhere, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Some people have made lessons for their students already, which is amazing, which is really, really cool to see. If you've never made a video before, there's an option there for you too. And for other reasons. Again, if you'd like to share what those other reasons are in the Zoom chat, that would be great. So it looks like most people have made videos for themselves at least. And so far, no one said that they haven't made any videos before. Again, it really does consolidate that idea that videos are becoming more and more important in our lives. There's just a question in the chat there about videos being uncut or edited. Either. I honestly mean either. It could just be grabbing a phone, pointing it and recording and sending that to your friends and family. Maybe you're just texting or emailing. That kind of, I would say, encompasses, it kind of comes under the first answer there. But yeah, so far there's no one who hasn't made a video before, which is really encouraging, knowing that, that there are resources. Everyone's got access to making videos. And I mean, the fact that most laptops and mobile phones these days do have cameras are really, really helpful too. All right, so I might just stop that one there and I'll go back to my other screen share. But please keep interacting in the chat if you'd like to add other things in. Wait a second. Oh, there we go. All right, back to that. So, moving on. Why do you think capturing videos are important? Now, I've got a few of my own ideas, but please feel free to share your ideas of why videos are important as well. In the chat coming through, yes, TikTok is such an important part of education. It's so accessible for many people, and kids love it, and that's what it's all about, really, trying to get down to our audience and try and engage with them in a way that they're familiar with and they love. So for me, I think capturing videos are really important as a teacher or as an educator to be able to reflect on yourself, and maybe it is as simple as setting up a video camera at the back of your classroom, or getting one of your students or colleagues to film you during a lesson, and you can watch it back and give yourself some feedback for self-reflection. It's an engaging tool for students, as we've already kind of discussed, using platforms like TikTok, YouTube, that kind of thing. As we've already touched on quite a few times during the TikTok series, it is a great resource for remote engagement or digital engagement. There's a lot of literature out there as well, a lot of people doing research on digital pedagogies, and I'll go through one of the most popular models that Australian teachers use today, called the Simar Model, which some of you might already be familiar with. But it's also a great way of sharing resources with your colleagues. If someone has already made a video about something, why not share it, and why not use that? And you can, better use your time and resources elsewhere. So these are some of my reasons, but if you do have ideas for why you think videos are important, please keep them coming in the chat. Joe and I will keep an eye on them, and we'll address them as we go along. So as I said, one of the most popular digital pedagogies that we use here in Australia is the Simar Model. And this is this kind of model is read sort of from the bottom up to the top. So substitution being kind of the first level of using digital pedagogies. So in the context of making videos, this can kind of fit anywhere within this Simar model. So S is for substitution. So we can use videos or digital technologies to act as a direct substitution for what we already do without technology. So instead of you maybe doing a demonstration or talking to your class in person, maybe you video yourself doing it and you show your students an uncut or an unedited version of that. And that is a direct substitution of and a use of videos in that sense. Augmentation is where technology acts as a direct substitute, but there are functional improvements. So that might be something like if you were to do, if you were, I don't know, tinkering and making something, maybe you can actually speed through some of the steps or cut between the steps so the students aren't watching you, you know, cut out something or watching you boil something or something that takes a really long time. You might be able to actually use technology to help speed things up or improve the functionality of your lesson. The next step, modification, is looking at how you can use tech to redesign tasks. So an example of that in videos might be, you might be able to set up a camera and set it to time lapse and watch maybe salt crystals grow, something that takes hours or days. You can kind of watch in a 30-second video. Or maybe you want to set it up in front of a plant and you watch that a flower grow and blossom again in a very short period of time. That's a great example of modification. And redefinition is kind of a creation of completely new tasks that weren't possible without technology. So an example of this is maybe you ask your students to make their own videos and let your students be the author of their own learning. And again, these are especially kind of towards the top. These transformation stages are where the most learning is affected by technology. And when you start digging in and reading more, things like tinkering and inquiry learning that have been covered in this workshop series become more and more relevant to these higher degrees there. Just to address some of the things in the chat as well, videos absolutely are a great way of record keeping, both for yourself as a teacher and for a student. I completely agree. I think that, yeah, video representation by videos help for developing better understanding. Absolutely. There are some things that we just can't observe, like like using slow-mo as well. That's a great way of utilizing technology in videos. You know, if you are popping a balloon, say, I'm not sure if any one of you have seen slow motion vision of a balloon popping. There's so much physics in that. It's fascinating. And the great thing is a lot of phones nowadays do have that slow motion capture ability, or hyper slow motion is even more fascinating.
There was one there, sorry, Isla, to interrupt. I was just from Donna's comment of capturing cultural aspects, which I think is a really important thing, and elements of traditional ways of knowing or traditional ways of learning that would otherwise be lost to time. So I think that's a really sort of not an immediately obvious one, but a really valuable one as well.
That is, yeah, thanks for that. So I'm sorry I missed that one, but yeah, absolutely. And students can kind of, if you can give them the tools to make videos as well, they can, as I said, be authors of their own culture. And yeah, they've got a record of that for yourself as a teacher, but for them as well. And using, yeah, mobile phones, absolutely, Donna. Students, kids, adults, everyone is so attached to their mobile phones. Being able to use that as a tool for education or communication, I think is so powerful. So there's been a lot of talking so far, so I want to move on to a little bit of interactivity. And for this next kind of activity, I'd love for us to make a little contraption together if you do have the tools. If you don't, that's totally fine. You can watch me do it on video form. But we're going to use this example to try and create just like a prototype of a video together. So for our air cannon activity, we need these following bits of equipment: just a paper cup or a plastic cup, masking tape, some scissors, and a balloon. As I said, don't worry too much if you don't have these things on hand. You can kind of watch along as I do them. So So I'm just going to stop sharing for now, and I will move over to a different camera. So hopefully you can see it a little bit better. All right, here we go.
I also, to interrupt again, I'd be curious if anyone that doesn't have these materials, what they reckon they could substitute, see if they could use something else that would work.
Yeah, love it, Joe. All right, I'm going to start off with my cup, and the first thing I'm going to do is take my scissors and make a hole just in the base. There is a bit of a safety warning here. Please be careful with your scissors. This is probably more for, obviously, for your students. Punch a hole there. Just kind of the size, about that big, not a big hole, but we can adjust that later. Next thing, I'd like for you to grab a balloon and just chop the top off. So chop maybe the first third of that balloon off. There. Yep. Now I'm going to turn my cup upside down and stretch my balloon over the top of my cup like this. It'd be great if this bit were in the middle, but if it's not, like mine, that's okay too. And then I'm just going to use some masking tape, or you can use some sticky tape, just to tape along the side so the balloon stays in place. Now, as you're doing this, maybe have a think about how you might be able to use this demonstration either to enter the competition or how you might be able to use it for your classroom or your activity with your students. All right. Okie dokie. Right, the next step is just to tie this end off. Go like so. And now we've made an air cannon. To operate this air cannon, I'll just move this out of the way, is you pull this back and the air should come out of that hole there. Obviously, there's nothing there to see, especially if you haven't made one for yourself. So I've just got some little bits of wool here. I'm just doing a bit of a knitting project at the moment, so I have lots of these little end bits that I've cut off.
What are you knitting? That's the important question.
Oh, thank you for asking, Joe. I'm knitting a little blanket in time for winter. All right, so if I pull this back and let go, there's a big gust of air. If you have one for yourself, you'll actually be able to feel the air come out. But that is basic instructions for an air cannon. All right.
I've to interrupt again, Isla, because it seems I'm doing this a lot. When we did a exercise last week with Ryan Jenkins from Wonderful Idea Co, we were supposed to do some balancing of different things, and I had none of the materials that we were supposed to present or to use, so I had to find what was behind me. I've done the same thing here. I had a bit of PVC pipe because I didn't have a cup, and I had some gaffer tape because I didn't have sticky tape or masking tape, but I did have a balloon. So again, I'd be curious to see if it works for other people using different things.
Good luck. Someone doesn't have a balloon. Any suggestions for elastic material? That is an interesting one. I think if you didn't have a cup and you had something smaller, you could try an elastic band maybe. I don't know if that would be any useful. If that would be useful, I'd love to know, Mai or May, if you've tried that out.
I'd be curious about whether you could put, you know how sometimes you have plastic wrap that you might get food in. whether you could stretch that across an opening and then flick the opening to see whether that would push the air out.
Ah, yeah, that would be interesting. Absolutely. So you're saying instead of this bit, you kind of like tapping on it, do you mean?
Yeah, that's what I figure. If you could stretch something across and then flick the end of it, maybe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely try that. And I know this is kind of moving backwards into the past workshops in terms of inquiry, but this is a great one, and tinkering as well, that it kind of, you can use lots of different materials. You can ask your students to use different materials, see what happens. A bigger cup or a bigger kind of the bit where the air is contained, what happens if you try something bigger, try something smaller, something more elastic, something less elastic. And the reason I love this experiment is that there's so much scope to do lots of different things. All right, so I might just move back to the slideshow. All right, and we'll move back into our topic of today, creating videos. So when, as Joe said, I have worked in television, and in television we do, in production, we go through 3 different steps. The first step is preparation, or sometimes called pre-production. And this step involves thinking about your content, rehearsing, and doing an equipment check. The second stage is filming or production. And this is where kind of the technical stuff comes in. So if you have an arts background, you might be at an advantage here. You might know lots about this, which is great. And then the last stage, of course, is post-production, about editing and things like that. So today we're going to try and step through each of these steps, starting with preparation. So I saw before that a lot of you do watch videos on Facebook and social media and YouTube, but especially for social media, obviously it depends on where you're watching your videos and why you're watching them, but often the length is really important, keeping it to a few minutes. For many of us, we don't watch, 1-hour documentaries on Facebook. We might do so on YouTube, but trying to keep the length of a video as short as possible. Think about the context. Why are you making the video? Then we want to write a script, and then we want to think about our hook. So what I mean by a hook is something at the very beginning, something to draw your audience in. And in the context of a video, we want that hook to be visually interesting. So I've got 3 screenshots here from 3 different YouTubers who, it's probably a bit too small for you to see, but each of them have more than 2 million views. So they're very, very popular videos, and none of them go for super long. But you can see that these are captured from the first few seconds. The first one with the ring on the notebook to me is quite interesting, and it is a great hook because it's something I can do right now if I wanted to. The second one there obviously probably uses quite a good camera, and while you don't necessarily need really fancy equipment, thinking about your shots and thinking about the production of your video can really lead to getting really beautiful shots like that second one. And that third one, I mean, there's nothing special about it, but it's very colourful, and that to me is an excellent hook. So for our next activity, I'd love for everyone to think about, write down, share in the chat if you'd like, how you would prepare a video for an air cannon. And maybe put together some dot points for almost like a script, if you like. So think about how long your video is going to be. Think about the context. How are you going to present the information, and why? So are you presenting the information because you want to teach kids about the physics of it? So you know, the concept of Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Maybe that's the information you're trying to get across. Maybe it's the inquiry learning that we were kind of talking about before that you want to get across. It's about students being able to ask their own question and answering their own question. What would happen if? I wonder what would happen if. Or maybe it's just a general, maybe it's a craft, or maybe it's an arts and craft kind of lesson that you're going to use this activity in. So I'd love for everyone to put together a couple of dot points for why, thanks Joe, for how long your video is going to be, what your video is going to convey, what's the point of the video. And maybe the last point is, what would you use as your first hook? What would your first kind of frame, is what we call it, the first thing that the audience sees, what would that be? So you might want to take inspiration from some of these screenshots here. What is really cool about the thing that you're showing?
I'm looking at the, what's the picture in the middle there, Isla, of the three pictures that you have?
I think it's salt. I think it's a really beautiful close-up of salt.
I'm imagining what would happen if the air cannon shot that. And I think that would be a great opening shot if you had the air cannon and then the salt spraying away.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Or even if you did it in slow motion, that would be cool. Someone mentioned that slow motion is a really, like, it has that wow factor, doesn't it?
Totally.
Something that I've seen, you've probably seen this as well, Joe, but especially a bigger version of this, filling the inside up with something like smoke or corn flour, something really fine, and shooting it. You can actually see the air come out, and that's quite spectacular as well. That's something that came to mind for me as my first hook.
Totally. I think that's a great one. I've never done it with smoke from a fire, which would be curious. In the past, I've only done it when I've been able to have access to something like a smoke machine. They use stages. But I think it'd work too if you had some really, like you say, corn flour or some sort of a fine dust. Yeah. Coloured
smoke would be amazing. Yeah. I'm not sure how you would get coloured smoke. But yeah, thanks, Sadia. That would be amazing. Maybe it is just a matter of colouring, you know, that fine kind of powder. I don't know what it is, like the colourful powder that people, that you can get for...
I'm thinking of the colour festival in India where they throw...
Yeah.
That's, yeah. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced that or they could tell us what that colour is, but that would be amazing.
Yes, absolutely. That would be really, really cool. First frame, air cannon operating. Yeah, amazing. Festival. Yes, the Holi Festival. Yeah.
Thank you, Sadia.
Yeah, some great kind of thoughts there. All right, we will move on, but please feel free to come back to that and think about it. We'd be more than happy to share our thoughts and give feedback if anyone has any, or ask the Brains Trust. There are lots of great brains in the Zoom chat today at the moment. All right. Part of preparation as well, as I keep saying, you don't need fancy equipment. A smartphone and or a laptop is usually enough to film on. And in the coming kind of days or in the next week or so, we'd love to share some example videos that I've made. And all of those are shot using a smartphone. And most of the examples today are using smartphones and laptop computers and things like that. But it is really important that you do a rehearsal and an equipment check. A rehearsal is a quick run through of the whole thing. And that will make you, often when I start, doing a rehearsal, I realize that, I don't have my props exactly where I want them to, and I have to leave the frame to grab a prop and come back. That kind of thing you can iron out as you do a rehearsal. Make sure you do a recording of the rehearsal and then watch it back so you can actually see if your equipment's working. Often there are lots of things that you don't realise that you can't really hear, but a microphone will pick up. Things like wind, birds chirping and things like that do come up really, really loud on the microphone. So checking all of that stuff in a rehearsal is a really good idea. All right. Now moving on to our filming phase, or our production phase. So this is where, if you would like to and are comfortable, feel free to switch your cameras on so you can see yourselves, and use this kind of forum as a way of experimenting and seeing how your light works. I know it's a little bit daunting turning your camera on, but if the more people who do it, the more likely you are that people might notice you because you're watching yourself. So hopefully if you do have your camera on, hopefully you can see yourselves. But if not, feel free to watch me or Joe if you'd like to participate as well.
I'll do it as well, but I can recommend watching Isla. It'll probably be better.
So a lot of it, again, the reason I really like video production and this kind of technical side is that there is kind of a scientific process to it. It's a lot of trial and error and tinkering and changing variables and things like that. But some of the tips to note are, firstly, lighting. You want to choose a spot with good, even lighting. And often outdoor lighting is much, much better than indoor lighting. I don't know if you can see my screen at the moment, but is my background flickering to anyone else?
I'll make it bigger, or I'll spotlight it rather, Isla, so it should be the main that everyone sees.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I can certainly see the flickering on the white background. Can anyone else see that? Throw it in the chat if you can.
Yeah, or a thumbs up or something. But that's not your internet connection or mine. It just has to do with the way that some lights work. So some lights flicker at a frequency that's not quite right with the camera, which also takes lots of little frames, and that's why you get this flickering. And for that reason, sunlight doesn't do that. Sunlight doesn't flicker, and that's why outdoor lighting is more often better than indoor lighting. But it is really important that that the lighting is the same. So you don't want, say, your head in the shade and your body in the sunlight. That can make it really difficult for the camera to see or to capture that kind of difference in lighting. Sometimes playing with lighting can also be helpful. So at the moment, you might be watching me and thinking, oh, like I can see Isla okay. But if I demonstrate just by turning my my main light in the room off, oh no, that's the fan. I'm not doing well with technology here. I'll just turn that light off, and then I've just got a desk lamp here that I'm going to turn on. And there's the combination of my second screen as well that I mentioned. That's actually quite a light screen. And by doing this, you might be able to see that, firstly, there's no flickering. And secondly, it might look a little bit better as well, depending on the connection and things like that. But yeah, because at the moment, all of the light is coming towards my face in this direction and there's no light behind me, it's much easier to see me away from the background. So I guess the point is playing around with lighting, even though you think you look pretty good, in terms of light, that is, it can be really helpful just to play around and see what happens. The second point is positioning. Now I'm just going to turn my main light on again. There we go. As I said, positioning. So I'm just going to change to my first camera again, if I can manage that. Sorry, bear with me one moment. Here we go. All right, so I've still got my mess from my air cannon, but as you can see, the point that I'm trying to make here, or the reason for this particular shot, is to show that there is air coming out of the air cannon. And you can see that pretty clearly, right? There's a nice clear background. There's obviously some colourful things here. I know the lighting is not the greatest here. Apologies for that. There we go. But you can kind of see that happening. But if I were to choose a different background, say something colourful like this, and I were to put my bits of wool on here and then use the air cannon to try and show that there is air coming out of the cannon, it's much harder to see. And that is the same with positioning yourself. So I'll just switch back to the other camera again. All right. So this is true for yourself as well when you're speaking to camera. Make sure you're not using a super busy background. And it can also help to step away from your background too. Often if you are too close to it, the light kind of bounces at a similar distance from you and the background to the camera, and that can make it hard to distinguish the subject, whether it's yourself or a prop, away from the background. The next slide, I'll just prepare my camera here, because I'd love to go through some framing and different types of framing we have. So we will go through different types of shots. So in filming, we usually use 3 different shots: wide shots, mid shots, and close-ups. So I'll just switch over to my other camera and we'll have a look at the 3 different kinds of shots. All right. Hello. So apologies if this is a bit hard to hear, but as I stand further away, this is what we call a wide shot, and I might need Joe's help facilitating here, but a wide shot is essentially a shot where you can see the whole body and you can see the environment that I'm in. Can anyone have a think about why a wide shot might be useful in production, in video production? If you'd like to pop it in the chat.
I'm gonna chuck that in the chat so that people can answer if you like.
Yes, please.
So why would you use a wide shot in video production?
Yeah, that's right. Why would you use a wide shot like this where you can see the whole body in video production?
If anyone can think of an answer, I want them to type it into the chat. Oh, look, Sadia, always coming to our aid. Sadia has said to give the look of a complete environment. So maybe you want to show everything that's around you.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. I love that. You want to show everyone. So in what context can anyone think of an example of where you might want to show your whole environment?
Whilst everyone else thinks, Isla, in a past life, I was a marine scientist and an environmental scientist. And so if I would ever try to articulate a key element about the work I'm doing, it would often be great to be in that space. And so if I was talking about it, I'd want the camera set up where I could actually talk about the space that I'm in so everyone could see the full environment. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And the opposite of that is quite true as well. If you were, say, doing your air cannon experiment, and you had a wide shot, and you were at a zoo, for example, with maybe you've got some chimpanzees or something in the background, that would be quite distracting as well, because that has nothing to do maybe with the environment you're in. I'll just step forward. I just forgot to put my glasses on. Dardson's just said that learners can relate more if there is a human character. And so, okay, I really like that as a viewpoint. So if they can see you, they might be able to identify with you more closely.
Absolutely, yeah, I love that. That's really, really cool. Yep. All right. If you have any more thoughts, please keep coming. please keep chatting and we'll come back to it as well. All right, we'll move to our next shot type. Sorry, I'm just going to focus the camera. The next one is what we call a mid shot. And this is kind of an example of a mid shot. It's kind of chest upwards. And again, similar question, why might we use a mid shot? Why might a shot like this be useful? Where might you use it? Why do people use it? Have you seen it before?
I like that. That's a great way to try and imagine it. So where has everyone seen a mid shot before?
To give a bit of a clue, this is one of the most common shots you see on television or on most media, actually. Is that Sadia with another one? Mid shot will help with the understanding of the body language of the presenter. Yeah. Yep. Movement and facial expressions. Absolutely. Yeah. The facial expressions is a good one. For sure.
I love that when you said yeah that first time, we actually really saw your facial expression. So it was a good articulation of the point. Well,
yeah. Point well made. Yeah, absolutely. Often, yeah, movement in the face is a great one. That said, if I don't know if you noticed, but I use my hands a lot. And in a mid shot, it can be a little bit distracting if you do use your hands because you kind of see them popping up now and then. So whilst, yeah, absolutely movement is really important and it's a great way of conveying movement in this shot, have a think about what kind of movement you're going to use or not going to use as well. It is the best way. You might have seen it more in Australia, certainly, and in kind of our context. Often it is used in news, and some people call it the news shot because news reporters will use it the most. It does convey quite important information without it being too like funny, or it can be quite a serious shot as well, depending on how you use it. All right, we will now move on to a close-up. So a close-up often is.
Sorry, I just realised that I wasn't on mute, but I was laughing at May's comment. The distracting hand movement syndrome is a real thing. It's so much like your thought music. If you're talking, you might say or ah. Hands are the same, and I think we can all relate to that.
Yes, it is a syndrome. Thank you. And working in TV, I've really had to hold my hands like this and hold them down. But even so, you can kind of, I was constantly doing this with my hands. I just couldn't keep them still. Which is why sometimes that wider shot can be useful. If you're standing back there, those hand movements are less distracting. Or you can move right up close and have a close-up shot like this. Often you don't see a lot of close-up shots of the face, especially in a presenting context, because it is distracting, and I'll move back because it's distracting for everyone, I'm sure. But you might use a close-up shot like this. Again, any thoughts about why would having a close-up shot be useful? Or have you seen a close-up shot before? And to give a bit of a clue, what can you see at the moment? What can you see now that maybe you may not have been able to see in a wide shot or a mid shot? Details on an object, absolutely, bang on, thank you for that. A close-up shot is not only a great way of seeing detail, it does show detail, it can also, depending on what you're trying to convey, it can be something really, you can use it for comic effect as well. It can be quite funny doing a close-up shot, or it can be a great hook as well. But as you may have seen, switching between shots can be difficult on the camera. So often most cameras on a phone, especially, as I'm sure you may have experienced, just tapping on the screen can help you focus. But as soon as you take it away, it can change the focus. So being really aware of that. It's like it's such a shame when you're using a close-up shot to show details and the details aren't in focus. That can be quite distracting. All right, so we'll switch back to the other camera. All right. And we'll move on to the next slide. So they're just some excellent, we've already discussed all this, and I think everyone is was great at and being bang on with what I think are the important parts of a frame. All right, moving on to some post-production work. You may need to do some post-production or editing, but it's not necessary. You don't have to do it. There are lots of free software or apps that you can use. You can use iMovie or Video Editor. They're two free software that you can use that are on laptops or desktop computers. Or some of my favourite apps on a phone are Filmora, Stop Motion Studio, or Google Photos even can do very, very basic trimming and cutting. But while you don't need to do any editing, you may want to look at some very basic functions like cutting, cropping, or trimming. And you may want to do these firstly because often if you're filming on a phone especially, there'll be that bit at the very beginning where you go, oh, and then you start talking. You might want to cut stuff like that out at the beginning and the end. Or you might want to include close-up shots of your details as you're talking. So you might, the way that I would film something like that is, or the way that I would film a video is do the whole thing in one take or in a couple of takes. So have a few goes if you need to. Stay on a mid shot, talk through what you want to, and then as what we call pickup shots, get kind of shots of your details, your close-up shots, or your wide shots of maybe the context or different things you're talking about, and then you can use editing to put that in place. Some other great video editing software there. Sorry, Joe.
No, I interrupted for the 1,000th time. I apologise, Isla. I was just saying there's a few people in the chat mentioning some of the platforms or methods they use as well. So I've got Adobe Master Pro, but also Riandy said KineMaster or KineMaster. I'm not aware of that one. Yeah,
no, me neither. But yeah, there are loads of different software out there, which is fantastic. I'm going to check that one out. A lot of paid applications as well. Obviously, there are more and more. They increase in complexity, and it's a lot of fun to play with if that's something you're interested in. A lot of these software actually come with music and sound effects and things like that. You can often download music and sound effects from free sites and copyright kind of free places as well. So they're really easy to search up on Google. So that does bring us back to our competition. So don't forget that all of these resources you can use to create your video or your photos for your entry into the competition. So for part one, please tell us how you might implement a demonstration you've learned throughout the workshop series. But it is crucial that you include some pictures or videos. And please keep in mind that entry closing date. That's part one. And once that's done, start having a think about part two. So, Joe, do we want to try and do another experiment at this point?
I think it's a really cool idea. So Isla and I were talking beforehand, planning what we might cover in this workshop. And Isla pulled out of her pocket a small item from eating sushi. Do you have it there, Isla, or is it already in a container of some description?
No, I've got this, but I also have something that I have heaps of at my house, which is
Awesome.
more specifically the lid.
The lid of the pen. What if we stop your screen sharing for a second and
Yeah.
we'll pull this up, because I'll share in a second.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to do, let's show everyone a bit of an example, and then we'll show a video, and then at the end, Isla and I will stick around, and if you want to ask some questions about the competition, we are here. We'll keep recording because maybe people that are watching this online after the fact have questions as well. But seriously, we're talking about this workshop and what we might do and how we might present it. And Isla pulled up this little soy sauce fish, the little thing she had before it. So if you buy sushi here in Australia, they give you soy sauce in a fish. That's just the way our world works. And there's an experiment that you can do with that little fish. And then I remembered a long time ago when COVID first hit, I was trying to think about, well, how does Science Circus International, how does Science Circus Pacific change what they do so that we can reach our audience, even though that I'm stuck here in Canberra and everyone that I normally speak to is everywhere else around the world. And so we connected the dots. Isla has an interesting experiment, and I actually dug up an old video that I recorded way back in the day. So Isla, are you going to talk us through how you do this experiment, or are you just going to do it? What's your plan?
Oh, great, Joe. I was going to ask you the same thing, but really? I can talk through the experiment.
Yeah.
Why don't I go through the steps for making it, and then we can switch to the video to see how it works?
Let's do that. All right. So Isla will show us how you might put this experiment together. She'll talk to you as if you are teachers or educators, because that's who you are. But she might, take some more time or talk about some specifics. And then I've put together a video that articulates how you might convey this if it was for a lesson for, let's say, middle primary students. But Isla, if you can take it away first.
Absolutely. So Joe did mention this. Unfortunately, this little contraption has a bit of a leak, so I'm going to use my pen lid, which is fine too, because they exist everywhere, and quite frankly, I find them very annoying. But we're going to use a pen lid and some plasticine or blue tack, something that's a bit malleable and can keep water out. So my first step is I'm going to grab a little bit of plasticine and stick it on the top, because my pen lid has a hole at the top. So I just want to seal that shut. There we go, like that. Next up, I have a glass of water, and this is where I'm going to do a little bit more trial and error, because I want to put some plasticine on the end of my pen lid here, and put enough on so that it just floats at the top. I don't want it to be too buoyant, and I don't want it to sink all the way down to the bottom. So we'll give that a go. Put a bit of plasticine on to the bottom there, like that. We'll see how that goes. So I'll pop it in the water. Oh. And I know it's a little bit hard to see, but that is a little bit too buoyant. It's almost on the side there. It's so buoyant that the whole thing's kind of sinking to this, like flattening out. So that's no good. That's not what we want it to be. So I'll put lots more plasticine on, see what happens there. There we go. So I've doubled the amount of plasticine, and we'll see what happens now. Oh, and that sunk right to the bottom very quickly. So that's no good either. It's always a bit risky doing a water-based experiment in front of the computer, isn't it, Joe?
I did an experiment with some friends from a community in Central Australia the other day, and I made a rocket which was mixed from bicarb soda and vinegar. And literally, I have two screens here. They are both covered in vinegar stains, because the thing I was making blew up. I'm not joking, it was a mess. Over here to my table to one side, you might be able to see there's chaos everywhere. So I agree that the liquids and computers don't mix.
Oh, I'm glad your computer still works. I'm surprised.
Only just.
All right. That's all we need, isn't it? Just enough functionality. All right, here's prototype number 3. We'll pop that in my glass. And that's pretty close to what we want it to be. It kind of sinks a bit, but bops to the top. Now I need a bottle just filled with some water. So I've got a big, what is this, 2-litre bottle maybe of water. Doesn't necessarily have to be 2 litres, but you can see that it's pretty well filled to the top with water. And I'm going to put my contraption into this bottle. There we go. Now, the reason that I do use a glass, and this step isn't necessarily compulsory, but I have done this experiment without a glass. And when you have a bottle top here that sinks to the bottom, it's very hard to get out, which is why I like to use a glass before I test my prototypes in the real tank. So this is ready for experimenting. Do you think, Joe, this is where you want to take over?
Great idea. So what we would be doing in a classroom setting now, if we were to do this live, would probably be encouraging students to get to that point and then have a moment of discovery themselves on what the next steps might be. We're going to stop there though, and I'm going to share my screen because, as I say, quite a while ago, I made a video. Now, it's not a great video. It's quite low quality that you'll see. The background, I literally just held my phone over a whiteboard. But what we're going to do now, I'm going to show this video. It takes you through the process that I just went through and covers some of the science. As I say, probably middle to upper primary would be the age range that you could aim it at, but we have both done these experiments for a broader range of students. After that, Isla and I will both come back. The video goes for about 5 or 6 minutes and we'll answer any questions you have about the competition. And then after that, we'll call it a day. But right now, I am going to share my screen. It's funny how you talk differently when you're stalling to try and share a screen. It's very stressful. Okay, Isla, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
All right, I'm going to push play.
Hi folks, it's Joe from Science Circus Pacific here. Today we're going to explore buoyancy. Now often when we do this we need to talk about words like density, displacement, mass, volume and different forces. Today we're not going to use any of those words and we're going to explore it with simple items. All you need is a bottle and one that is a little bit squishy, one that you can press is really good. You'll need a pen. Well, you won't need a whole pen, you'll just need a pen lid, so you can get rid of the pen. Okay, and the other thing you're going to need is some blue tack or some plasticine will work fine, or really anything that's a similar sort of consistency. And the last thing you'll need is a jar. Now I like to use a jar that's got a nice open top so you can get your hand in there nice and easily. All right, let's go. First thing you want to do is get your jar and basically fill it with water, or at least 5 or 6 centimeters of water. Then you're going to take your pen lid and we're going to drop it in. Well, you can see it's sort of floating, but at the moment it's floating sideways. And what we want is for it to float pointing up and down. We want it to float straight in the water. So this is where the blue tack comes in. We're going to get our blue tack, we're going to pull a little bit off and we're just going to stick it. On some pens you can get a bit of a hole in the top and what we want is to be able to trap air inside our pen. So we're going to cover up that little hole. Doesn't have to be with much blue tack, just enough to cover the hole. Then we're going to get a little bit more blue tack and this time what we're going to do is put it round the bottom. Now you don't have to actually close the bottom of the pen, we just want a ring of blue tack around the bottom and still have that hole there. Now, you're going to take your pen and look, it should float in the water, or just at the surface of the water. Next thing, you've got your bottle filled with water and the lid's on. Well, we're going to take the lid off first because we need to put our pen and blue tack into the bottle. Now it should do the same thing that it did in the jar. It should float just at the surface. Now you can put your lid back on your bottle. Perfect. Now I want everyone to watch the pen lid. I'm going to take my hand and squeeze nice and hard on the bottle. What? When I squeeze the bottle nice and hard, the pen sinks. When I let go, it floats to the top. Okay, let's explore why this is happening. Let's draw a model of our pen lid so we can imagine what's happening inside. So here's our pen lid. We've got our plasticine on the top, or our blue tack, that is stopping the air from escaping, and we've got a bigger chunk of plasticine on the bottom that is keeping our pen pointing upright. Now inside our pen lid, we've actually got an air bubble. What happens when we squeeze on our plastic bottle is that we actually make that air bubble smaller. And when we have a smaller air bubble, all of a sudden our pen lid becomes less floaty, and so it sinks to the bottom. When we let go of our plastic bottle, we let that air bubble go back to its original size. And when it was that big, it was big enough to make the pen lid float to the top. Why does squeezing on the bottle make the air bubble in the pen lid get smaller? Well, to explore this, we're going to need another bottle filled with water and a little air bubble. Now, what I want you to do is watch the air bubble that's inside this bottle when I squeeze on it. Did you see that? It's a little bit easier to see if we draw a line around the bottle to start with. Okay, so that's how big our air bubble is. And then when I squeeze, see how that air bubble gets smaller? Crazy thing is, you can't really squish water by pushing on it, but I can squish the air. So when I squeeze on the bottle, I squeeze on the water, and the water squeezes on the air and squashes it and makes it smaller. Now this air bubble here is just inside our bottle, but the same thing happens to the air bubble that's inside the pen lid. A smaller air bubble is less floaty, and so when we squeeze on it, we get the air bubble small enough that our pen lid sinks to the bottom. And when we let go, the air bubble gets bigger. Now, if anyone's ever seen a scuba diver swimming around in the ocean, they use a very simple and similar mechanism to this to go up and down when they dive. They have a special jacket that they can push air out of to get a smaller air bubble, which will mean they'll sink. Or put air in to get a big air bubble that'll make them float. Pretty cool. All right, folks, that's all the time I have to show you a little bit about buoyancy, or things that float and things that sink. Give this one a go at home. Let me know how you go.
Sweet. I was muted. Well, thank you for the clap there, Sadia. Look, no, that was just an example of something that you can do. That was all recorded just with one phone. I did use, I have a Apple Mac, so I used iMovie to edit that together. But that took me And that probably took me a few hours because I had to sit around with a whiteboard and draw things, and but a lot of the work was done in the editing after the fact. So Isla showed you in person how you might start with that sort of a demonstration. And the audience that I was trying to reach there was primary school age students from a broad range of locations across the Pacific in this instance. So I was trying to draw on use simple materials that they would have available. I was trying to articulate it in a way that would suit that audience. And I was trying to cover a little bit of basic science at the same time, as well as environmental science. As I say, that's one way to do it. I think you could do that effectively in 30 seconds if you really wanted to. I think you could do it effectively in 2 minutes if you wanted to. That was just one way that took, I think, 6 minutes was that one. Oh, thank you, Mai. Very intriguing. I appreciate that. Now, before we go any further, there's not much further to go, we're towards the end. I do want to ask if anyone has any questions around the competition or any general questions around filming. We're basically towards the end now. If you do want to turn on your camera, please feel free. But otherwise, feel free to throw it in the chat. What do you think, Isla? Did we cover all the important parts?
I hope so. And thanks to everyone for dialing in and interacting with us. It's always good, isn't it, to be able to have a bit of interaction. It's Zoom calling is a weird and wonderful world.
It's something that takes a bit of getting used to. I think both of us come from a space where we're so used to being in the same room as everyone. And being able to have the conversations before and after as well. So often we find ourselves, it's very strange now to start a session where it's you flick the switch and you go. I think we're both from a place where we're used to talking to everyone before and after. But if you do want to talk to us before and after, I will say that you have my email address. Please feel free to get in touch. If you do have any questions, excuse me. And if you have a query that you'd like to direct to Isla, please send it to me as well, and I can make sure she gets that, and she'll respond to you as well. Excellent.
Hi, Joe. I don't have any question, but I'll say the video that you just showed, the best part for me was like the acoustic guitar tune. That was really cool. When the pen lid was going up, there was like an upbeat tone, and then it was going down. So it's like really interacting, and it's fun for students to learn with the tone and sounds, and the effects.
Thank you, Stadia. That was actually, it came about as a result of a little bit of boredom from me. I was trying to create some content, and I had a guitar in the room with me, so I was like, well, how can I incorporate a little bit of fun as well? So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I have a question regarding how, do you have any advice on how much content is enough? Because sometimes I think we tend to, we want to explain more and put in too much into, a few short minutes. So how do you gauge how much is enough?
Isla, I think you should start with this one.
So I guess it depends on what you're using the video for. Do you mean, in the context of the competition, or do you mean in general making a video? How do you know how much content is enough? In general, yeah. I think, as I said, it really depends on why you're making the video. But for me, I always like leaving my students or the people that I'm engaging with a little bit, just for them to want to know a little bit more. And I think that's where the sweet spot might be. So I would, I think firstly writing down some key messages that you want to get across, something that's kind of, if it's this squeezy bottle, if if it's to communicate buoyancy, maybe you say, I definitely want my kids to know about density. I definitely want them to know about, I don't know, maybe density is enough. And then everything else you kind of can mention and then say, you know, look it up or find out more here or ask me about it or something like that. So kind of trying to prioritize that, I think might be the best way to go. I think you can never have too little, to be honest. I think especially as educators, you never go, oh, there wasn't enough information there. I mean, kids might say that, but as from one educator to another, you often think, it's very rare that you think, oh, there wasn't a lot of information. I think more often than not, you say, oh, that was too much information. There's so much there. So I think if in doubt, it's better to go less information and then direct people to where they can find out more than the other way around. Does that help? Do you have anything to add, Joe?
That's a great.
Sorry to interrupt. No, I was going to say, Isla, that was exactly what I would have said, and such a good question, Mai, because so often as well, when you're the person that's making the video, quite often you're interested in this sort of stuff. From my perspective, I was a scuba diver, and so this idea of buoyancy and density, I wanted to share all this information with everyone because it's amazing. But I also wanted them to understand. And so I was like, well, what is the simplest package that I can try and convey? And so I removed all the jargon, all the scientific words, which you often can't do if you're working to a curriculum. I recognise that, but I tried to say, well, how can we simplify this the most and retain the physics or the scientific knowledge? And for me, that became, well, something will float if an air bubble is big, and it will sink if that air bubble becomes small. Now, if we were working with a bigger audience, I might have spoken about density, buoyancy, mass, displacement, all these sorts of words. But what how I started was identifying who my audience might be and then tailoring that message to suit. And for a video like that, I think one scientific principle is enough, you know, and I kept quite a simple one. But, you know, you could do that for secondary students and introduce density. And you could talk about the equation, D equals M on V, density equals mass on volume. And you could have that exact same experiment, but instead of cutting to the picture of the air bubble, you could cut to a example of the, what's it called, Isla, when you've got letters instead of numbers? Algebra, to the equation that you were trying to articulate. That might have made things more complicated, Maya. I apologise.
Thank you very much.
I think another thing to add there, I watched a video recently that was really fascinating about, it was a guy who was a science teacher in the US, and his kind of thought was that often science communicators and science teachers get so bogged down on accuracy in science that engagement kind of gets left off to the side. And so the example that he gave was, you know, in DNA, in virus replication, which is obviously, it's a big topic at the moment with coronavirus. But he was saying, you know, is it really important that we say, oh, viruses don't actually replicate with DNA. They've got RNA. Oh, but some of them have nucleic acid. And getting into the details there can obviously, something like that can really, that's a huge can of worms, right? Not all viruses have DNA, all this kind of stuff. But the basic concept is viruses go into a cell, their DNA is injected in, they replicate more virus. And so this idea that, you know, content isn't necessarily, it's not about scientific accuracy, it's about what's important, what's going to get the students engaged. Because at the end of the day, we as educators probably want our students to be interested in science and want to know more, as opposed to them rote learning or knowing facts. I mean, having said that, of course, like Joe said, teaching to a curriculum can be quite restricting in some instances, in some countries especially, where content is such a big part of it. But you know, these skills in knowing how to learn more, knowing how to get more information might be kind of the way to engage students, I think personally.
100%. The only, I know we're bouncing off each other, but the thing I would say is in a lot of curriculums, let's say this was a junior secondary school curriculum, you can basically guarantee that the thing that they're going to need to understand is that density impacts whether things float or sink. And so you can open with that. You can make sure that they get that piece of knowledge that is related to the curriculum. You understand, or they understand how it applies to the real world. They could then respond to that in an assessment piece, but then you're giving them the platform and the impetus to want to explore more. But again, neither of us are currently practicing teachers, so we need to acknowledge that and refer to you as the educators and the teachers in this space. All right, everyone. Wild, amazing. I've had a great time. Either of you enjoyed yourself?
I have, yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me along. It's been great.
Beautiful. As always, a huge thank you to our colleagues from across the world. I'm constantly in awe of this. There are so many of you from all over the globe that are joining us, and you know, technology means that we can do it and we can interact, and it's phenomenal. And I feel very thankful for the opportunity. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Isla. And we'll see you next time, which is next week with Steve Sherman, South African / global maths superstar. I first learned about science communication around the time that I got to meet this man. And you've never seen anyone hold hundreds of students completely enraptured whilst he does something with a $5 note. So worth looking at. Alrighty. Thank you, everyone, and bye-bye.